Nobody expected the moment to unfold so quietly, so beautifully right in front of Buckingham Palace. Among the noise, the photos, and the fast-moving crowd, one Japanese tourist stepped forward and did something that stopped even the King's Guard in their tracks. No shouting, no chaos. Just a deep, respectful bow that carried centuries of tradition from one culture to another. And in that brief second, something shifted. The crowd fell silent, and every camera froze. Why did this moment hit people so deeply? If you enjoy stories that reveal the human side of royal traditions, or you simply love those rare moments where respect speaks louder than words, make sure to like this video. If you want more real stories from inside the Royal Guard, the Royals, and Buckingham Palace, go ahead and subscribe. Share it with someone who loves these powerful real-life moments too. The morning outside Buckingham Palace began, like any other bright, busy, live, with tourists who had waited their whole lives to stand before the iconic black and gold gates. Cameras clicked non-stop. Children leaned forward on their toes to catch a glimpse of the mounted guards, and the rhythm of London pulsed through the air like a heartbeat. But woven into all that noise was one man, quiet, composed, and almost invisible at first glance. A Japanese tourist in a simple gray jacket, holding a small guidebook in one hand, stood just a little behind the line of people pressed against the railing. Unlike the others snapping pictures or calling out excitedly, he watched the King's Guard with stillness in his eyes, as if he were observing something sacred. He wasn't here for entertainment. He was here for respect. As the changing of the guard approached, the atmosphere shifted. Even people who had no idea what was happening could feel it. The sound of boots began echoing down the mall, precise, sharp, perfectly synchronized. The kind of march that carries history in every step. Phones shot up instantly. A ripple of excitement moved across the crowd. But the Japanese tourist did something entirely different. He put his phone away. Guards advanced in flawless formation, red tunics glowing in the sunlight, bearskin hats rising like dark towers above the sea of tourists. Their rifles rested in perfect symmetry across their bodies. Every movement was sharp, deliberate. Not a single guard's expression broke. And yet just before the line of soldiers passed the gates, Japanese tourists stepped forward, not aggressively. Not loudly, just one gentle step that placed him a little closer than before. Something in his posture changed, too. His shoulders squared, his breathing steadied, and his eyes softened with an emotion that didn't match the noisy excitement around him. Then, right there in the open space, where thousands had stood before him, he bowed. It's not a casual nod, not a quick dip of the head, but a deep traditional bow that carried centuries of meaning in a single motion. For a split second, the world seemed to pause. The couple next to him fell silent mid-sentence. A child stopped waving her souvenir flag. Even the flutter of pigeons seemed to freeze in midair. It was as if everyone suddenly realized that something delicate, something quietly powerful was happening right in front of them. The bow itself lasted only a moment, but it was enough, because the King's Guard noticed. The lead guard did not break protocol, not fully, but he shifted. Barely a fraction of an inch. Just enough that anyone paying attention could see it. His chin lowered almost imperceptibly. His eyes settled on the man who bowed. And for the briefest heartbeat, the soldier's posture, normally as rigid as steel, softened. It was not approval, it was not violation, it was acknowledgement. And to the Japanese tourist, that was everything. He rose from the bow with the same calmness, his face still peaceful, almost grateful. He hadn't done it for attention. He hadn't done it for a viral clip. He hadn't even realized anyone was watching. He simply wanted to show respect to a centuries-old institution that, in his culture, deserved a gesture worthy of history.
Whispered, "Wow!" Someone behind her murmured, "Did you see that?" A man lifted his camera but lowered it again, feeling as if capturing the moment on a screen would somehow ruin the purity of it. The guards continued marching, their routine unbroken. But something subtle lingered, a tiny echo of shared humanity that hung in the air long after the last boot strike faded. What made this moment so powerful wasn't the gesture itself. People bow every day. People show respect to the Royal Guard often. But this bow was different because of the sincerity behind it. This wasn't spectacle. This wasn't fandom. This was a cultural expression of honor, offered quietly in a world full of noise. And that contrast hit people hard. Because in a place where tourists crowd for the perfect photo, where laughter and chatter fill every corner, here was one man who chose stillness. One man who believed that some traditions deserved reverence, not selfies. One man who instinctively honored the guards the same way he might honor a shrine, a samurai memorial, or a national ancestor back home. For the guard, that moment mattered too. Soldiers in that position endure everything. Mockery, shouting, intentional distractions, tourists invading their personal space. Some days are harder than others. Some days require more restraint than most people will ever understand. But respect, true respect, it's rare. And when it appears, even the most disciplined guard feels it. After the march ended, the atmosphere around the gates felt strangely lighter. People talked softly, thoughtfully. Children calmed. Even the tourists who'd been shoving for position seemed a little embarrassed, stepping back as if reminded that the guards weren't actors in costumes. They were soldiers of one of the oldest military traditions in the world. The Japanese tourist stepped back into the crowd, his expression unchanged. He seemed almost unaware that people were staring at him with curiosity, admiration, or quiet reflection. He simply returned to observing, this time with his hands respectfully folded in front of him. But the moment wasn't finished. A palace warden nearby, a man who had clearly seen thousands of visitors come and go, glanced his direction with a warm nod, an unspoken thank you from someone who understood the weight of what had just happened. And then something else happened. A little boy, maybe 8 years old, tugged on his mother's sleeve and asked, "Mom, can I bow too?" His mother smiled softly. "If you want to, darling." The boy stepped forward and copied the gesture, simple, small, but sincere. And for reasons no one could quite explain, the crowd responded with a gentle wave of smiles. A silent chain reaction. Respect inspiring respect. By the time the guards returned to their next post, the mood around Buckingham Palace had transformed. What began as a normal tourist morning became something almost cinematic. A reminder that simple gestures can resonate more deeply than any grand performance. And somewhere in the middle of that crowd, the Japanese tourist finally smiled. Not because he had gone viral. He hadn't yet. Not because people praised him. But because, in his quiet way, he had honored a tradition he admired. And the world had paused long enough to feel it. Little did he know, the moment had only just begun. Long before the Japanese tourist ever stepped foot in London, before he even imagined standing before Buckingham Palace, the gesture he performed that day had already lived through more than 1,000 years of history. A bow in Japan isn't just a polite action. It's a language, a silent sentence, a message shaped not by words, but by posture. And that's where this chapter begins. Not in the crowd, not at the palace gates, but deep inside the cultural heart of Japan, where respect is a craft passed from generation to generation. When the tourist bowed, what he offered wasn't simply gratitude toward the king's guard. It was a kind of gesture he might offer before entering a temple, greeting an elder, or showing appreciation to a teacher who shaped his life. The depth of the bow, the slow rise, the quiet stillness afterward, it spoke volumes. To understand that moment, you have to understand what bowing really means in Japanese culture. For many Japanese people, a bow is not optional. It's woven into daily life so naturally that children learn it before they learn how to write their own names. They bow when they meet someone. They bow when they apologize. They bow when they say thank you. They bow when they pray. Even in business, where deals and negotiations can span hours, a bow can mean more than 1,000 signatures. A small tilt of the head says thank you. A deeper bow says I deeply respect you. And the deepest bow, held for several seconds, says, I honor you. So when that tourist bowed to the king's guard, he was not just acknowledging a soldier. He was honoring a centuries-old military tradition he admired. In his eyes, the guards weren't performers behind a fence. They were warriors standing at their post, guardians of royal lineage that stretched back longer than many countries have existed. And the truth is, he wasn't wrong. Because if you look closely, the King's Guard has its own ancient story, a story most tourists never take the time to understand. Behind the red tunic and the towering bearskin hat is a soldier trained to an elite standard. They are not actors. They're not there for entertainment. They are fully operational military units, responsible for protection of the monarch. When a Japanese bow meets a British salute, two worlds collide in the most respectful way. But that moment hit harder because those two traditions are strangely similar. Both cultures, Britain and Japan, place enormous value on ritual. The changing of the guard is not just a routine. It's a performance of discipline, loyalty, and national pride. The Japanese bow is a physical expression of humility, honor, and sincerity. Both are silent languages. Both demand precision. Both carry meaning far deeper than most people realize. When the tourist bowed, he wasn't thinking about cameras or crowds. He wasn't thinking about what would go viral. He wasn't thinking about how people might react. He was thinking of the soldiers, their discipline, and the centuries of duty they represented. And the guard recognized that sincerity instantly. Because while tourists shout, wave, or make jokes trying to get a reaction out of soldiers, this man chose humility. He chose reverence. And it caught the lead guard's eye for a reason. Respect, when genuine, moves people, even people trained not to move at all. But here's the part most viewers never consider. That tourist likely had no idea just how much that bow would resonate with the guard themselves. Many soldiers in the Royal Guard Corps admired Japanese discipline, martial history, and the way their culture treats soldiers, active or retired, with profound dignity. For them, seeing someone bow that deeply is like witnessing a rare form of gratitude. And that's what created the emotional spark. For the tourist, the bow was second nature. For the crowd, it was surprising. For the guard, it was meaningful. For the world, it was unforgettable. But to really feel the weight of that moment, picture where this tradition came from. Imagine a formal Japanese tea ceremony. Quiet, slow, every movement deliberate. The host bows before preparing tea. The guest bows before accepting it. Each bow is a circle of respect, a reminder that every interaction is a shared experience, not a transaction. Imagine a samurai greeting his lord in ancient Japan, a deep, unwavering bow expressing loyalty earned and loyalty given. Imagine modern schoolchildren in Japan bowing before starting class, a way of resetting the mind, humbling the ego, and showing appreciation for learning itself. This is a cultural DNA behind the gesture that unfolded at Buckingham Palace. And yet, something else added to its power. Location. In Japan, bowing is normal, expected, everywhere. But in front of Buckingham Palace? In front of 1,000 tourists pointing cameras? In front of guards who stand frozen under the pressure of global scrutiny? Bowing becomes more than a gesture. It becomes a bridge between cultures, a bridge between traditions, a bridge between two forms of respect that would never normally meet. And that bridge, whether people realize it or not, created the emotional tension that made the moment go viral later. It wasn't because the bow was dramatic. It wasn't because anything unusual happened with the guard. It was because people sensed that something ancient and beautiful had crossed over into a modern world obsessed with attention. In a crowd full of people trying to capture something, one man chose to offer something. In a place where most people act like spectators, he acted like a guest. In a world that celebrates noise, he brought quiet honor. And that contrast is what made people stop scrolling, stop talking, or stop walking for a second and think, why don't we show respect like that more often? It's easy to consume traditions. It's harder to honor them. And in that moment, he did both. As the chapter closes, imagine the scene once more. The guards marching with flawless precision, the crowd buzzing with nervous excitement, the palace towering behind them, and one man bending gently at the waist, offering a gesture older than the city around him, a gesture that needed no translation, a gesture that opened the door to everything that happened next. Because what came afterward, inside the world of Royal Guard, revealed just how rare and meaningful that bow truly was. Before that quiet bow ever appeared online, before the comments, the shares, the headlines, something much more personal happened behind the unbreakable discipline of the King's Guard. To understand why the bow mattered so deeply, you have to step inside the guard world, a world most people never see, even when they're standing just a few feet away. Because behind the stoic faces and rigid posture, the King's Guard lives by rules, training, and pressure that very few civilians can imagine. When tourists come to Buckingham Palace, many think the guards are performers, almost like part of a moving museum exhibit. But every single one of those soldiers is a fully trained member of the British Army. Some have served in conflict zones. Some have guarded foreign embassies. Some have spent nights in the freezing cold on assignments abroad. And here, in front of the palace, their discipline is tested in a way that is less dangerous, but far more relentless. Every morning, before tourists crowd the gates, the guards prepare for duty with a strict routine. Uniforms inspected down to the stitching. Boots shined until they reflect the lights of the barracks. Rifles checked, adjusted, and handled with precision. Every movement has purpose. Every step has meaning. In their world, posture isn't just posture, it's pride. Silence isn't just silence, it's professionalism. Stillness isn't just stillness, it's centuries of tradition standing on their shoulders. This is why disrespect hits so hard, because it disrupts something sacred. You've seen the videos, people mocking the guards, stepping into their path, waving in their faces, shouting jokes, trying to provoke a reaction. And while the guards rarely flinch, the truth is they feel it. They just bury it under layers of discipline and training. This is also why respect, real unforced respect, hits even harder. That day, when a Japanese tourist stepped forward and bowed, the lead guard's reaction was subtle, but it was real. It wasn't a break in protocol. It wasn't a smile or a nod, but it was recognition. A soldier seeing sincerity in a sea of noise. But why did it matter so much? Because the guard knew exactly what the bow meant. He knew the cultural weight behind that gesture. And in a role that demands near-perfect detachment, moments of genuine humanity become rare treasures. Fleeting flashes that remind soldiers that people sometimes understand the gravity of their duty. Imagine standing still for hours through heat, rain, or biting cold. Imagine holding a rifle that weighs several kilograms without moving an inch. Imagine listening to hundreds of voices around you, some awestruck, some mocking, some impatient, some respectful. And imagine doing all that while representing an entire nation. The guards are trained for physical endurance, yes, but emotional endurance might be even harder. Every shift is a mental battle. Stay still. Don't react. Don't break posture. Maintain the line. Carry the tradition. But the bow didn't challenge the tradition. It upheld it. In the guard's world, respect is a quiet currency. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need spectacle. It doesn't need cameras. It just needs sincerity. When the Japanese tourist performed that bow, he unknowingly offered something extremely rare, acknowledgement without expectation. And that is why the guard responded, not with words, not with movement, but with a subtle shift in energy that only trained eyes would recognize. Within the regiment, moments like these are sometimes shared in the barracks after shifts, not as emotional stories, but as something simple like, "There was a good moment today." Soldiers don't often talk about feelings in detail, but they remember flashes of humanity, the way others remember small acts of kindness from strangers. The changing of the guard ceremony itself has a depth that most people overlook. Every step is timed. Every turn is rehearsed. Every command echoes history. The guards train for weeks, sometimes months, to perform with near-flawless precision. Their uniforms are symbolic. Their movements are symbolic. Even their silence is symbolic. Silence can mean authority. Silence can mean discipline. But on that day, silence meant something else. It meant respect being exchanged, without a single word spoken. And that exchange lingered long after the ceremony ended. After the guards completed their march and rotated into position, the lead guard remained motionless as always. But inside, he carried that moment with him. A small reminder that not everyone sees the guards as props for social media. Some see them as soldiers, real soldiers, deserving of honor. And in the guards' world, that matters. Hours later, as the shift changed and the soldiers returned to the palace gates, conversations between them were short, clipped, professional. Yet one guard quietly said to another, "Did you see that bow earlier?" And the other replied, "Yeah, rare. Good to see." That was it. No emotional breakdown. No dramatic reaction. Just two soldiers acknowledging a moment that stirred something inside them. But the story didn't stop there. A senior guard officer who had been watching from a short distance later mentioned it in the most understated way possible. Nice gesture from that tourist. Reminds you why people come here. And that's the truth. People don't come just to see red jackets and tall hats. They come because the guards represent something enduring, something dignified, something that ties the past to present. Respect, when given freely, breathes life back into tradition. The Japanese tourist bowing wasn't a flashy moment. It wasn't loud. It wasn't performed for attention. But inside the guard's world, that's exactly why it mattered. Because sincerity stands out in a place where everything else blends together. And later, when the video finally surfaced online and began spreading across social media, the guards themselves didn't react publicly. They never do, but some of them saw it. Some of them heard about it. And quietly, in their own controlled, disciplined way, they appreciated that the world saw what they saw. A simple gesture, a moment of pure respect. A reminder that traditions aren't just performed, they're honored. And this tiny interaction, seconds long, opened the door to a much bigger reaction around the world. A reaction that would transform one quiet bow into a global message about respect, culture, and humanity. By the time the sun began to set over London, the moment at Buckingham Palace was already fading into the swirl of everyday memories. The Japanese tourist had moved on with his day. The guards continued their duties. The crowd shifted, dispersed, and reformed, hundreds of new faces replacing the ones that had witnessed the bow. But the world had other plans for that moment. It started with a single clip, a shaky smartphone video no longer than a few seconds, uploaded without much thought by a tourist who simply found the gesture beautiful. The video wasn't polished. It wasn't edited. It wasn't narrated. It was raw, real, and quietly powerful. Within hours, it began circulating. People didn't just share it, they reacted to it. Something about the combination of culture, silence, and sincerity struck a nerve. In a world used to viral videos fueled by shock, drama, or humor, this one was different. It was gentle. It was respectful. It was grounding. The comments said everything. This is the kind of humanity I want to see more often. A simple bow with so much depth. We need more of this energy in the world. No words, just respect. It spread from TikTok to Instagram, from Instagram to YouTube, from YouTube to news pages. Soon, millions of people across the globe were watching a man bow in front of soldiers who didn't speak, didn't react, didn't break discipline, yet somehow shared a meaningful exchange with him. But the viral reaction wasn't just because of the gesture. It was because of what it symbolized. In a time when public interactions are often chaotic, rude, or performative, this moment reminded viewers that respect doesn't require language or rules. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need applause. It just needs sincerity. The Japanese bow and the British Guard's acknowledgement fused together in a way people weren't expecting. Two traditions meeting for an instant. Two cultures blending silently. Two histories brushing fingertips for a heartbeat. The internet rarely reacts to subtlety, but this time it did. Why? Because the moment was universal. Everyone understood it. Everyone felt it. Everyone recognized something pure in it that stood apart from the noise of everyday life. The bow was Japan. The stillness was Britain. The meaning was human. News outlets began picking up the story. Headlines turned emotional. A bow that silenced Buckingham Palace. A Japanese tourist shows the world what respect looks like. The King's Guard responds in the most unexpected way. Suddenly, the tourist, who had no idea his quiet act had been recorded, became the center of global attention. Reporters tried to identify him. Commenters wondered about him. Some even hoped the Royal Guard would recognize him officially. But the man himself remained unknown, a kind of symbol rather than a celebrity. And maybe that anonymity made the moment even more powerful. He wasn't trying to be famous. He wasn't seeking validation. He wasn't performing for a camera. He was just being himself. And that authenticity was the spark. The British public took notice, too. Many people commented that they were moved by how a visitor from another country showed such deep appreciation for a British tradition. Veterans, Former guardsmen and even historians weighed in online, explaining how rare moments of genuine respect feel for soldiers who often endure mockery or misbehavior from tourists. One former guardsman wrote, "People think we don't notice what's happening around us. We do. We see everything. And gestures like this stay with us longer than you'd expect." Meanwhile, in Japan, viewers felt proud. Proud that someone from their culture represented their traditions so gracefully on the world stage. Proud that the bow was recognized globally as a sign of beauty, not strictness. Proud that a simple gesture carried such weight. But underneath the global reactions, something quieter and far more important was happening. People everywhere were rethinking the way they behave in sacred or historic spaces. Parents showed the video to their children and talked about respect. Teachers used it as an example of cultural exchange done right. Tourists commented that they felt inspired to act more politely at historic landmarks. It was as if the bow opened a small window through which people could see a gentler version of themselves. And then there was the guard. The lead soldier who had seen the bow firsthand didn't comment online. He didn't break protocol. He didn't give interviews. He simply carried on with his duties, like he always did. But inside the regiment, the moment didn't go unnoticed. Some guards quietly acknowledged that it was one of the most meaningful gestures they'd witnessed in months, maybe years. Others said it reminded them why their service mattered. Some simply said it was good to see something pure for a change. The moment had done something rare. It brought a sense of unity without needing noise, speeches, or explanations. And that unity didn't stay in London. It traveled across continents. In South Korea, people commented on the similarity between bows and their culture and the Japanese bow. In India, viewers related to the idea of honoring elders and traditions. In the U.S., people admired the discipline of the guards and the humility of the tourist. In Europe, users talked about cultural respect transcending borders. One simple bow had traveled farther than most world leaders in a year. But here's the part nobody expected. As the video continued to circulate, more and more people began recreating that respectful energy when visiting iconic places. Whether it was bowing, lowering their voices, stepping back politely, or simply stopping to appreciate the moment rather than filming everything. Respect, it turned out, was contagious. The world didn't change overnight. It never does. But something softened. People were reminded that small actions matter, that traditions matter, that soldiers behind the stoic faces are human, that cultures can meet without clashing, that reverence still has a place in the modern world, and that respect, authentic, humble, genuine respect, can create ripples far bigger than anyone expects. As the story of the bow finally settles into history, it leaves behind a message so simple yet so easily forgotten. You don't need grand gestures to honor something. You don't need perfect words to connect with someone. You don't need a script to show kindness. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet bow in the right moment, a bow that speaks louder than any shout, a bow that bridges cultures, a bow that reminds the world what humanity looks like. And that is why this moment will be remembered, not as a viral clip, but as a gentle spark of respect in a noisy world.